I just remember feeling like this fear of like, you are not safe, leave now.
Each day was truly like its own plant medicine ceremony.
The way I felt going into each of the temples was that there are spaces that are bringing you back into wholeness.
I have to acknowledge the fact that there are so many feet that have walked those halls before my own.
I know you have a very special connection with the Sphinx.
She said that a teacher who has not yet reached a level of mastery uses tools that are outside of them, but the true master knows that all of the tools are inside of them.
We look up, it was in the clouds making absolutely zero noise. And I was like, bro, it's a UFO, it's a UFO.
When I stepped into the temple, I heard a woman's laughter, and immediately I could smell these herbs and spices. I realized that is actually Isis. It was like a flash went through the room, and then her energy was just in that space.
The only energy I had left in my body, I directed it toward the pyramid, and I just bowed. I have no words to even describe what that being is. It's been just used as this wonder of the world that you go, you take your picture, you leave. The immense just gratitude I had bowing on the grass to the land of Egypt. It feels like home. It was powerful. It was very powerful. Eluña, welcome back on Just Tap In for the third time. To start off, I'm not going to ask you what you're most excited about, but I will ask you, what is most alive in your heart when you tune in to Egypt?
Home. It feels like my home. And it feels like a place that I get to go to relive memories that are beautiful, filled with beauty, filled with healing, and also a sense of hope, a hope for humanity and for the future because of what was once there and what we are restoring.
What are we restoring?
The golden age, and what it means to be in a unified collective and living from our hearts and being open to others living from their hearts too, whatever that looks like.
And obviously we have a lot of stories to tell from this 23-day initiation that we were just on just a few weeks ago in Egypt. I know that we're going to be going back and forth around what we were both activating and healing and witnessing in that trip. But just for a general overview from you on what this specific journey meant and uncovered in your life for you.
So this was an initiation for the people who came. And because it was my first time going back in this lifetime to lead something like that, it was also an initiation for me. And it called upon every reserve of energy that I had. And it also called on the deepest amount of trust in myself and also in what was unfolding before me, because creating an itinerary and creating even sacred space to allow true sacred space to come through means that you're not controlling it. And so you just allow. Yeah, I as the container was there to hold whatever was to come through. And there was plenty that I absolutely could not predict. Some of it was desired and expected, and some of it was completely unexpected and delightful and also challenging, which I'm grateful for, because any true initiation cannot be an initiation without its challenges, and I got to face many.
Let's start with fire. Why did you feel called to begin the journey with the element of fire in the first place?
Yeah. So fire, firstly, is the element that I'm probably the most comfortable with. I am deeply connected to my spirit and always have been since I was a child. And there is transmutation and alchemical processes that can happen internally and externally when fire is introduced to something. And so I wanted people to be able to go into a space of depth and into a space of darkness, but have a light with them. And that meant being able to tune into their own fire and go into the darkness and not feel so alone, and know that they are empowered by spirit to do that. So that is really why I started it that way, and began with that fire ceremony.
So fire is the spirit in many ways.
It is. That's how I see it.
The first ceremony we held in Aswan, where we were called, and you led us through this beautiful journaling process where you were asking deeper questions that I feel I never asked myself before. And a lot of the things came through. Do you remember any of those specific questions that were crafted in that ceremony that you felt were going to bring people more into their own inner darkness and utilize the fire to activate that and bring that out?
I do. They were on the spot, because I really don't plan things ahead of time. It was in the moment. And what I knew needed to happen was that people needed to go back and revisit parts of themselves and parts of their timeline in this life, and remember what happened during that time. Whether it was good or bad, they needed to go back and remember. And all of us have challenging experiences and memories from childhood. And so that was the first place that we went, was around, I believe, 6 years old, and remembering a sense of helplessness when we were helpless. The next time that we visited was looking at the age during adolescence or puberty, and feeling a sense of being abandoned, left behind, and also feeling very shut down, because that is, I think, one of the most common themes that I see with different people, especially actually young men. So many young men that I have worked with have told me that it was during adolescence that they kind of turned off their true self and stopped feeling into their heart. And they were made to feel like they weren't allowed to express themselves, whether that was them being funny or being overly sensitive, whatever it was, they shut it down during that age. And so then a different part of them came online that's a little more aloof, a little more reserved. And for women as well, that is a very challenging time for most, because we do not have in this world, we do not have the initiations that we once did. And young men and young women, when they are moving through adolescence, that is one of the most potent and pivotal times of life. And we really are not supported there. So young men are shown different ways of how to manage themselves, but not how to manage their emotions. Young women are shown different ways of how to make themselves look a certain way, but also not how to manage their emotions and what it is they really want. So we had to look into that, because that is one of the most, I think, times in a person's life that can be filled with a lot of wounding and a lot of darkness. So we also visited that. And then the next phase after that was being in our early 20s. And that's, again, this transitionary time where I have said forever, no one prepares you for your 20s. No one does. Everyone thinks it's going to be this great time because either you're in college or you are working and you have all this freedom. And if you have not been properly equipped, you have all this freedom with no idea how to manage it. You feel very irresponsible, and a lot of irresponsible choices are made during that time if you don't have good support. Or even if you do have good support, you want to feel like you're independent, and so you will make different choices financially or with a relationship or with a job, whatever it might be, where you end up kind of regretting what you did, and you have to learn the lesson a very hard way because you were not prepared for it. So that was about exploring feeling irresponsible and feeling unprepared to enter into adulthood, essentially. That was the other piece that we looked at there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A big thing that came up for me was, I think it was a question around a moment where you felt embarrassed. And immediately I went back to middle school, where we had, physical education, and we'd have certain classes where we were able to, practice our sports and do these different types of activities. And I remember we had our PE uniform that we would have. And in a moment, I was just standing on my own by myself. And I remember just like two guys came up behind me and pulled my pants down in front of everyone that was there. And then I was made fun of because the boxers that I was wearing these like tighty whities, you know, that became the joke. And I think the first moment where I felt like self-conscious about myself and my body as well. That was one of the first things that came up when you asked that question. And it goes really tied in with the aspect of, you know, being our truest self and shutting down that play that we feel as children. Because when we're children, like being naked, being, you know, seen in that way, that's such an innocent energy. And then it becomes this added layer of, you know, sexuality that begins to, you know, move around in your psyche. So that was one of the things that came up for me in that fire ceremony. Just feeling that embarrassment. And you said that we started off in the original wound, which is the wound of separation from the motherhood, which Hathor represents, which we'll get into. I remember, and it's funny because my mom is here in the background, but there were moments when I was in elementary school that I felt, you know, after school, the parents were picking their children up, and my mom, being Latina, she would be late a few times. And that was the original moment where, you know, you start feeling that actual separation from your mom, from motherhood. So it's really powerful to just be able to see into those experiences. And I remember we wrote down on a paper, shared it with the whole group. So we were being witnessed in ways that, you know, we're not normally witnessed in society. And then we burnt it in the fire, but we kept the ashes for later. Why did we do that?
Yeah, and I want to take a note too, just about what you said about being witnessed. That is one of the most powerful forms of healing, is just being witnessed. And I do not hold that it is necessary or even valuable to go back and dig things up for the sake of digging them up. There must be a purpose. So sometimes in a therapeutic setting, if someone has experienced something traumatic and they need to go back to uncover what happened and then be witnessed in that, then that is helpful. Just going back for the sake of stirring things up, though, without kind of an end goal, I don't think is very helpful for most people. And so in this particular setting, being witnessed by a group, by a safe group, and then dissolving it in the fire, which is a ceremonial act, and it is an act of alchemy, because you are now choosing to take everything that you have just lived through, essentially, put it into the flames, and watch it burn away while being witnessed in that and choosing something different, which is what happened, because each person chose to dissolve the beliefs that came from those experiences that they relived. So some form of identity was taken on from each of those experiences. So maybe for you, as you mentioned, this embarrassment or shame about your body, that is something that maybe you released in the fire that day. So being released and claiming something new for yourself and being witnessed in that holds so much power. And the reason we kept those ashes is because, well, they were all collective. And so we were each, as a member of this group, carrying the weight, as if you will, of those ashes for each person. So it was collected, and it was a collective amount of ashes, so that each person did not feel alone in what they were carrying, because we feel very isolated, particularly in the identities that we take on. We feel like no one else feels this way. No one else has this experience or this story about themselves. But when we share like that, and then we hold these ashes, we realize we are one human family, and we are really one human body. And we all experience basically the same things in different forms with different stories and labels attached, but it is in essence, it's the same. So we gathered those ashes, we collected them, and we held on to them until we had a ceremony with the Nile and connected with that mother river. And that is when we fully released them.
Yeah. That ceremony, when we released it into the Nile, that's skipping ahead a little bit because there's some moments in the temples that I would love to get into. But to speak into that, fire ceremony where we let go of the ashes, we were just invited in that sharing circle to share whatever was on our heart. And I do remember feeling like I wasn't able to let go of fully the layers of the ego, the identity. And when I started the podcast, it was just me, a camera, looking into a computer screen. And you don't necessarily get to witness that there are actual people on the other side. And a lot of the people that had been listening to shows like mine, to channels like you, were in the group. And I felt that I had to come in with this sort of mask because I've been in spaces where, you know, the proverbial term of never meet your heroes. And I've been disappointed in some aspects of people that I've met, that I've put on a pedestal or I've looked up to. And I didn't want that to happen with me. So I was in a way holding back. And when I spoke it into the group I just said to everyone, I'm afraid that the perception you have of me is not the one that's going to match with when you meet me. And talking about the weight, you know, the weight that we carry, as soon as I spoke that into the group, just like this weight dropped. And after that, I felt the most playful, the most me that I could access in that moment. And it was all about just being witnessed in a fear that was holding me back. And that taught me the power of, you can say things that are uncomfortable, that maybe people don't want to hear of you. You know, maybe we perceive that people want to see the most perfect version of us. And that's where the power of authenticity lies, where you can just be fully free. Like, yes, I'll make an inappropriate joke at the wrong time, maybe. But that's just who I am. And when I let go the ashes into the Nile, it was like letting go of this like superficiality that we go into society with, into our interpersonal relationships, because we're trying to create an image of what we think people want from us. And there's also another quote that is, I'm not who I am. I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who you think I am. I am what I think you think I am. That was it. So I think that you're seeing me this way. So I put myself into a box, essentially, because I think that whoever I'm speaking to is already carrying this perception of me. So I become that perception. And that's part of just being able to mold our identities. And our ego is so flexible. But when we went into the Isis temple, it was about letting go of the ego completely. So what was going on there when we went into the Philae temple complex and letting go of that?
On the night of the lunar eclipse?
On the night of the lunar eclipse, yes.
That was a big night. We started the entrance to that temple. Before we actually went in, we started with a meditation and an activation that brought in dragon energy for us, but also for the planet and the collective. And I learned prior to going to Egypt that during eclipses, dragon energy is able to enter more strongly. And I believe that that's actually why there are so many stories around not going outside during eclipses and not meditating during eclipses. I think it's actually just a kind of a masked and a fear to prevent people from connecting to that, essentially. And so we were outside and we meditated during that eclipse and had a beautiful activation. And before entering the temple, the way that I have been guided was the way that I guided the group. So there are many gates throughout the temple, and you begin on the outside, which is a representation of the chaos of the world and the place where it is disharmonious and disorderly. But entering into the temple is a space of harmony and a space of order. So the first gate represents crossing into the space of absolute light, and then semi-light, and then there is absolute darkness at the farthest back portion of the temple. Each gate is also a representation of a gate within ourselves, and I perceive those at some of the temples during certain activations as the different chakras in our body. So there are 7 gates that it happens to be that way in this temple. In most temples, that's actually how it is. And so crossing through each of those gates, we move through the different chakras and the different energy that is associated with each chakra. So the first one is a feeling of safety. And that must be present because in order to get all the way to the back in this temple where there are no lights on, it's the middle of the night and there are no lights in the temple, you have to feel safe within your own self to get to the very back and to go into the absolute pitch blackness. You cannot see anything in the back sanctuary, but that is the space where the most light is available. That is the representation of our 7th chakra. And that is where we are able to receive downloads and receive activations. So that is what we moved through when we were there. And people were very brave. I was very proud of our group.
I was like, let me embody that bravery and let me go straight into the sanctuary. So I just walked forward. You know, the darker it gets into the temple, you can't see anything. And inside of the sanctuary, I just remember feeling like this fear of like, you are not safe, leave now. I think I lasted less than a minute inside of the sanctuary the first time. And then I just walked around the temple, which was interesting because I was still in the chaos. I chose the chaos. It's a choice. Do you want to light your consciousness in the face of darkness, or do you want to stay in this chaotic material third dimensional world that is essentially showing you aspects of the illusion, but you're still in the illusion?
And it's chosen out of comfort rather than out of a true knowing and understanding. Yeah, it's a beautiful reflection.
Comfort too, because the sanctuary is hot as hell. And, you know, I think I was wearing this cape thing and I just said, no, I think the breeze is going to be a little bit nicer outside. Let me just sit with the moon. But it was comfort in disguise, and I wasn't ready that time around to face that darkness. We eventually came back to that temple, but where did we go after to allow us to prepare for the next time that we would come back to the Temple of Isis and do it in a different way?
That is when we left Aswan and we went to Luxor. And when we were in Luxor, we were able to visit the Temple of Hathor, which is a beautiful and magical space. And it actually speaks to what you mentioned initially, which is this wound with the mother. Going there was a way of reconciling that and healing that for each person, because regardless of the relationship that each person has with their human mother, we have a wound as humans from the mother goddess or also from the earth as a mother. And so going back to that, Hathor is a representation of many things, but one of the things is as a mother for humans. And so that is why we went there. And that was a very activating space.
It was. And there was something even just symbolic of us starting with the core wound, and then the moment we left the initial place we were at in Aswan, it was confronting that wound. And you also received quite a lot of information from Hathor regarding cellular regeneration, amongst other things. Is there anything you would like to share around what Hathor was teaching us and, in a way, the collective as a whole?
Yeah, it was quite beautiful. I will perhaps speak more to this one day in a video. I'm not sure when I'll share all of this. And I don't remember everything off the top of my head, but what she brought through for me was that each part of the cell, so there are mitochondria, there are cochlea, and many other parts of the cell, the nucleus itself, the very center of the cell. those different spaces in the cell are associated with each one of our chakras. And so when we enter into just one cell, we are able to actually affect every part of our body and every other cell because they will speak to each other, and essentially align our chakras just by moving into one of the spaces. So for example, the mitochondria, which is what gives the energy to the cell, that is associated with our heart chakra. And when she brought that through, it made so much sense to me, because the more heart energy we have, the more life force we have, essentially. And when we choose what type of heart energy we want to have, we move through the world very differently, which is part of the purpose of meditation, of course, is choosing the energy that you want to move about with. And so choosing to go into your mitochondria and give them the energy that you are needing in that moment, and knowing that that cell is going to speak and communicate to all of the other cells in your body, that is powerful. That feels like sovereign health to me. And that is what Hathor also teaches, is she is all about sovereignty. So that was a piece that came through. And the other part of it was really connecting as an individual to what the mother wound was for each person. Because again, some people feel a certain way about their mother, their human mother, and some people feel a strong sense towards the earth as their mother. I for one, that is who I connect to the most. Years ago, I was adopted essentially in a beautiful ceremony, with the earth becoming my mother. And so that is how it has been for me. And what that means is the relationship that I have to the collective, but also to the earth herself, is very unique, because I do perceive her actually as my mother, and I speak to her as if she is my mother. And going to Hathor allows different wounds that are present there. And the wounds can be, because that's a rather abstract term, it could be a sense of unsafety, a sense of mistrust, a feeling of possibly being abandoned, someone else or something else being chosen over you, and you being kind of cast aside. Those are all representations of wounds that I am still moving through and working with. And Hathor is so perfect to help with that, because the energy that she brings in is this deep sense of trust and really of surrender. She allows you to be held, to know what it feels like to be held by a mother and to be caught by a mother. If you are afraid of falling, if you are afraid of trusting, you can trust that she will be there for you. And she shows you that again and again in so many ways, energetically, but also throughout that temple space. It is very present.
There's obviously many different ways that we can approach going into a temple. Like if someone asks me, I want to see pictures of the trip, and I have 0 pictures. And that was because we were being guided to enter these spaces in a very unique way that I had never experienced before. Before I share a little bit about my experience of how it evolved, the more we had exposure to the temples, what is your approach into going into one of these temples?
Yeah. Always with reverence. That is the energy that I carry when I am entering into any type of sacred space, whether that's a space that I am creating for myself or another or a group, and particularly before I am going to commune with the energies in a space, the energies being the way that people look at deities. I don't perceive Hathor as a deity. She is an energy, and she was a human. So she carries a lot of power and a lot of energy, but the energy that she carries, for me, it inspires me to go into reverence. And so each temple holds different energies, and there are so many layers to those energies and to those spaces. The way that I perceive it is the beings that we could look at it chronologically in stacked layers, the beings that built those sacred spaces, they have given their life force, their energy to the creation of those spaces. And then there are the beings who have overseen those spaces in the past during Egyptian times, the temple keepers, and even the different people who went there to worship or to receive healings or to go through initiations. They were keepers of that space. And then above that, in the present moment, we can look at the temple keepers who are there now. All of those beings and all of their energy is still there. And if I want to drop into the deepest space within myself, which means it is mirrored in the deepest space within that place that I am going to, I have to acknowledge all of that. I have to pay homage in a way and just honor the fact that there are so many feet that have walked those halls before my own, and so many beings that have overseen that space, bringing water, bringing light, bringing consciousness to those spaces. So before I enter, I always ask for permission of all of those layers of beings. I honor them first, and I state my intention, and then I ask for permission. And because that is how I have been guided to enter those spaces, that's what I encourage others to do as well. And each person is free to do what they wish, but that has been the way that I have been able to connect the most deeply.
Yeah. The way I felt going into each of the temples was that there are spaces that are bringing you back into wholeness. And I started making those connections when we went to the temple of Edfu, because I was walking around that temple, and there was a moment I heard you speak upon that Horus was the representation of the divine masculine and the divine feminine, and that 1 + 1 = 3. So it started to really percolate in my mind around what it really means to be in wholeness with ourselves, and how 1 + 1 can equal 3. How did you perceive that? And what were you also tuning into around that representation of these two divine energies coming together, especially in these spaces, and what we can learn from that?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, it does equal 3. and the 3 and the Horus, it is the relationship between those two sides. So the divine feminine and the divine masculine, the relationship between those creates a holy trinity, and we are able to create that holy trinity within ourselves. And the way that I have come to understand this a lot after doing my own work internally prior to going to Egypt and before I knew anything about Horus, I realized that lack, not feeling like there is a holy trinity within myself, it made me seek a wholeness outside of myself. And so when I was younger, that may have been seeking thrills, for example, just seeking fun. It may have been later on in my life seeking a relationship to fill that space. And eventually it became that I held a ceremony for myself to bring those two sides together, in which I committed to myself to hold both of those sides, to honor both of those sides. And so each day when I wake up, I honor both of them. And that has shifted my perception of what it means to walk around as a whole human being, because I am deeply feminine, and my soul's energy, if you will, is divine feminine primarily, but I must bring in a balance of the divine masculine so that my divine feminine can feel safe. And moving through those temples, that is really, especially Edfu, that is really, it invites that in for you. And Kom Ombo does the same. It invites a joining of those different energies. Edfu is unique because of the way that plant medicine is incorporated into that space. It really allows you to move into a different way of understanding those energies within yourself. And as you saw, they're all over the walls. There are many recipes for different types of plant medicine. And so it's really about how can this plant medicine, something that is outside of you, be used as a tool so that you can come deeper into wholeness, not seeking wholeness in the plant medicine, seeking wholeness within yourself and allowing the plant medicine to be a teacher and a guide and a dissolver of boundaries within you. That is really how the ancient Egyptians used and the people of Khem used plant medicine prior, and that is still the way that I believe in using it as well.
There was this moment where you were also explaining about these different emotions that, when we bring up things like grief, rage, I was just thinking to myself, I don't remember the last time I felt rage. And these are emotions that are maybe not as socially acceptable to feel rage and to give yourself spaces to feel that. So, before going into that alchemy and that magic that was created in the temple of like Kom Ombo, for example, I would love if you could walk us through this overview of these 4 emotions that you brought to the surface for us to be able to get acquainted with and allow ourselves to feel.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. So I call them the four sacred emotions. And one of the ways that I orient is that, and what should actually be stated first, is that I distinguish between feelings and emotions. So there are millions of feelings. There might be an infinite number of feelings because each person has a different experience. Feelings, the way that I interpret them from this kind of categorical perspective, is that a feeling is brought on by a story in the mind. And so one moment you might be feeling happy and excited, and the next moment you might be really stressed out because of a story in your mind of, I'm going to be late and now I'm stressed. Those are feelings. An emotion is something that it is energy in motion, emotion. So it is an energy that fills your body. It is an energy that kind of overwhelms you in a sense, in depending on the person, in a positive or a negative way. And it is something that you absolutely feel in your heart, you feel in your gut, you feel in the deepest parts of you, and possibly up here high in your chest, depending on the emotion that's moving through you. I find that, as you mentioned, grief and rage are really not accepted. They're not tolerated. Women tend to have an easier time accessing every emotion. And now in today's world, women are more invited, I'll say, to access grief and rage. And there is a lot of grief and rage to feel. And it's not just on an individual level. We could go back, just like during the first fire ceremony, and look at different experiences, reliving it, and realize, oh wow, I'm carrying a lot of grief from that experience. That is possible. There are also layers of grief and rage, as well as love and joy, that are carried in our ancestral lineage. So the grief and rage, because of the amount that humans have been suppressed, that is really where it is very dense, it is very heavy, and it's difficult to access and bring those up because they are challenging emotions. A lot of people don't even know how to relate to them, but they also carry so much weight because they are from our ancestral line. And so when we feel grief or rage, it could be hundreds of people's grief and rage that we are feeling in one moment. And so it, especially today in 2024, it can be very, very hard, especially if you are alone, if you have no experience with those emotions, and if you don't understand what's happening physiologically. Because when grief or rage move through us, it is such a strong energy. Our bodies can shake. We might feel like throwing a temper tantrum and not understand why. The somatic experience of the body, it can actually be frightening for people, let alone the emotion itself and other memories that might surface from that emotion. Sometimes people will experience those emotions and past life memories will come through, or ancestral memories will come through, where they will have a memory of someone and they might be retelling that story to their mother and say, I saw this woman who looks like this, and this is what she was experiencing. And their mother might reply and say, that's actually my grandmother. You are telling a story that I was told as a child that my grandmother experienced. That is very common in today's world because of the amount of ancestral lineage that people are able to tune into, and just the amount of work and healing that our ancestral lines carry. So that is something that I feel is very important, because our emotions are one of the core ways that our soul speaks to us. And it's one of the core ways that our higher self speaks to us. If we are not clear in our heart, and for me, a clear heart means that there is an open window, or it's an open stream. There is no dam. There's nothing blocking it. When that is allowed to happen, we are able to experience emotions, and we might have a huge amount of rage in one moment, but because there is an open flow, it passes through us quickly. We don't hold on to it anymore. So feeling those emotions more and more, and feeling safe within our own self to feel those emotions more and more, it allows the energy to move through us, and we are able to stay clear and therefore in alignment with our higher self more easily. And that is why I taught it.
Does the earth feel anger? Does the earth feel rage? Does the earth feel joy maybe? How do you perceive that as a living being with the emotions that we feel that move through us as humans? What is it like for the being of the planet that we're on, and how we're maybe seeing that play out in today's world?
Yeah, beautiful question. So, on the other side of every emotion, when we feel any emotion, grief, rage, love, or joy, when we feel any of them fully and completely, we experience ecstasy. We experience a state of bliss. And I have experienced, it's what taught me about this, is because of my own experiences with this. And I believe there are other gurus or teachers, maybe from India, who have talked about this, how when you feel something fully, you actually feel a state of ecstasy. I do believe that is a teaching. And I have experienced that personally. The earth, as a teacher, is showing us how to live in a state of ecstasy. The earth is in a perpetual state of ecstasy. And that is our true and natural nature, is to be in a state of ecstatic bliss. So the earth, from my perception, does not experience emotions the way we do, because emotions are here to teach us what it is to be in our natural state, which is ecstasy. It is to bring us closer and closer into that, like our higher self or soul. It is living in a state of ecstasy, partially because of the dimension it lives in. It's very dense down here, so it does have that going for it, but we are still able to feel that here. And that's one of the things that we're learning and kind of showing, if you will, to the evolution of the universe, that we can be in a state of ecstatic bliss, even in a physical 3D body, with all of the limitations and all of the needs that are associated with a 3D body. We are still able to feel that. So the earth is teaching us how to be in a state of ecstatic bliss and how to feel all of our emotions. There is plenty to look around on this earth and be enraged by it. Even human involvement aside, there are things that we could feel deep grief over. A volcano erupting and destroying a forest. That could be very sad. And there is so much to experience joy over. A butterfly finding a flower. A bee buzzing past you. There is so much joy as well. So it's all to teach us. But the true state is ecstasy.
After Edfu, we went in our little boat. Not so little. We went in our boat and we docked in this one place before going to Kom Ombo. And that was the first time we accessed the tool of breath work, while we were, as a group, wanting to bring these emotions out, because I feel like the temples were mirroring us, these trapped, maybe, parts of ourselves that needed expression. And we found a perfect place to do this ceremony of breath of fire, which we then rebranded as the dragon's breath, where I felt that we were in there for like an hour doing the breath work, and you just feel how these emotions of rage, like once someone would speak it or allow it to be expressed, it was like the whole group would just take that rage and bring it up and like alchemize it, expand it. It almost felt, in some sort of way, an energetic orgasm. As a group, we were creating magic. We were creating alchemy in that moment. And then we went to Kom Ombo, which was the only temple that had 2 sanctuaries. Why was that temple so different in the sense of how we're talking about the merging of wholeness, what they were using that temple for? And this is a loaded question, but why we had to feel those emotions in the fire, in the cacao ceremony, and in the breath of fire before going into Kom Ombo.
I love that you know that that's connected, because of course everything's intentional. So Kom Ombo is a space where we are able to alchemize light and dark. So it is the coming together of both polarities. And so it could also be perceived as masculine and feminine. And the way that humans tend to interact with things, if it's not present first, such as a challenging emotion, you're not going to want to go into it. And so prior to going into that temple, it was important for us to stir a lot of things up, to shake up the container of our being, so that when we went into that space, we could alchemize it. Because as you mentioned, the temples as a being and filled with the energies that they are filled with, they help us transmute things. And we find parts of ourselves reflected in the temple space, and within our own selves, we find reflections that we didn't realize were there. And so particularly in that temple, because of the 2 sanctuaries and how they each represent light and dark, we needed to have a sense of what is the darkness within me that I am carrying? How can I move through this temple space to transmute that? And what is the lightness that I'm carrying? And what needs to be transmuted in the light? Because there is also plenty to be transmuted there. There may be aspects of ourselves that we put on display, that we're fully comfortable with, that are still not necessarily helpful, but they're there. So both of those sides need to be transmuted. And going into that temple, moving through the way we did, of each person was able to actually choose how they did it. But in general, we moved through one side, went to a sanctuary, and then we moved back through and went to the other sanctuary. That was essentially the point, so that we could face both sides of ourselves. That temple is also very unique because it is the temple where sexual initiation and sexual healing would take place. I don't know if there are any books written on this, but prior to my first time of going into that temple, that is what I tuned into immediately, was that it's a temple of sexuality. And I saw, in a vision came to me of actually seeing different hieroglyphics of genitalia and of women giving birth in that space, hieroglyphics of women giving birth. And then, which is the only temple actually that's happened with, really in such a direct way. And so then when we went there, those hieroglyphics were exactly there, which was quite interesting to see. That was the first temple that I had ever seen that at. And it holds so much power also because of that back space that is in the temple, that's behind and below the sanctuaries, with the massive hieroglyphics and etching in carvings of those different beings that oversee the space. That holds a lot of energy. And there is a very unique etching in that space of this gateway that looks like it is in the third eye space, and then there are two ears on either side and two eyes near it. And that, to me, shows how, when we alchemize and bring together both polarities within us, we are able to see that much more clearly, because then there is not something holding you back, tugging you into the darkness, or pulling you into the light where you're not able to see what's in the darkness. Both of those things are true. That temple holds a lot of power.
Yeah, Kom Ombo was the turning point for me in the way that I was walking into the temples, because when we were on the backside of Kom Ombo with those huge hieroglyphics, those etchings, I was just putting my hand on one aspect of it. And then there's a moment where you came in, you grabbed my arm and said, no, put your hand here. And for me, I was like intellectually wanting to receive all of these visions, and, I wanted to see, like, get out of my body in a way, open my third eye. I'm like, here it is. Here it's good. Like, this is going to be the moment. I'm going to start channeling my light language now. And it just invited me to let go of the expectation of, oh, something's going to come through, but let me just feel into this hieroglyph. And I just remember just feeling this like vibration in my body. I didn't know exactly why you placed me there, which would be an interesting way to come back around to that, as in, what was the significance of certain points in a temple that might be more activating than others. So yeah, I'll give you the floor for that.
Sure. So I actually placed you there because it was the connection point directly to the hieroglyphic that I just described of opening your third eye. And it was a way I could see. I don't do that very often because each person needs to have the experience that they need to have. But when I felt into it, I could tell that was a way for you to bring these two sides together, because that is what that exact space represents. There is a line that goes directly up to this gate that I'm talking about. So it is the two halves of the temple meeting, the light and the dark joining together. And I wanted you to have that experience, to receive what you could from that space. And as you mentioned, it is easy to intellectualize. Trusting the process is part of how we receive more. So there are many times when I will go to different spaces in temples, whether it's a hieroglyphic or whether it looks like a random stone lying on the ground. When I go, yes, there may be times when I receive visions. There may be times when I receive an activation of some kind and maybe my body is shaking. That could happen. But most of the time, I am going and I am merely expressing my thanks. That's all I'm doing, because it's an honor just to be in that space. And I know that I am receiving so much just by being there, that the thing that I can give back is my thanks, the energy of gratitude. And so that is what I'm doing most of the time. It's easy to intellectualize, though. I understand.
Yeah, so after that, I walked around. I went to the beginning entrance and I walked in a straight line just through until the moment where the sanctuary split apart. So you had the right and the left. I was called to go to the right. This is a moment where that's when it gets kind of weird when you're in the temple, where you just feel like you need to do something, but your mind's like, why are you going here? Why are you going there? And I had a pendulum with me, and I just felt the call to go to each individual sanctuary and put the pendulum over it. And you know, we would just see that the pendulum would just go like this in circles, in circles, in circles, and I'm just holding it, and I'm like, am I activating this sanctuary now? Am I going to be blessed by Kom Ombo, whatever god is associated with that temple? And then I went to the left one and I did the same thing. So I felt that it was a metaphor for me of acknowledging both of those aspects, the feminine and the masculine. And then there was this center place where there was, I don't know necessarily how to describe it, but yeah, I'll let you, because you got the vocabulary down to express what was in the middle of that.
It was like a small alcove.
Yeah, alcove.
Yeah.
I'll look that up afterwards. But I went inside that space, that concave little alcove, and I just put both of my hands down, and that was like, let me receive the merging of those two energies. That was a big turning point, because it was the first time going into a temple where I felt like, go here, do this. And then afterwards, I just had a lot of insights around, yes, I have been in my masculine at times. I've been flowing in my feminine as well, but I'm still in a way seeking that other half of the energy outside of me, seeking that one plus, where's the other one, instead of looking inside and saying, that's within me, and that's something that needs to be a priority for me. That needs to be, before going and seeking outside for someone or something to complete that energy. That was very symbolic of, I need to do this on my own first. And in a sense, as you said, you held your ceremony where you married yourself, you made vows to yourself, you renew them every year. And then I was like, that needs to be a priority in my life.
Yeah, it's very easy, I think, and it's human nature, because we are so physical, and we do take so much in from the outside. We take our breath in from the outside, we take food and water in from the outside, so it's very natural to think there is going to be something outside of me to give that to me. But as you know, all paths lead inward. So that is where we must go. We must go inside. If we are feeling a sense of lack in any sense, there is a part of us that we are not in tune with. And there's a part of us that we are disregarding or ignoring, that we haven't paid attention to, maybe that we haven't even met in ourselves. And those temples, they allow you to meet yourself, all of yourself.
And it's almost like we believe that once this other half will come into our lives, they'll cover up the darkness that we've not been able to look at. And going from there, we went back to Aswan, where we started the journey, and we had a visit again to the Temple of Isis. And this time I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna go in the sanctuary this time. I did feel much more in my power than when we started the journey. So I said, this time might be a little bit different. And you talked about bravery in the beginning. Almost every temple has 2 lion guardians on the outside before you enter. And we did a short, just to ourselves. This time we didn't do a collective meditation, but everyone dropped into their own space, set their own intention, And then we just started walking in when we were called to. And when I went in toward the temple, I saw one of the lions, and I just went immediately to the lion, and I just put my hand on the lion's heart. This was a statue of a lion. It's a animal energy that I've connected with a lot. And I just asked the lion to give me a strong heart so that I could navigate inside the temple, because I didn't know what I was going to expect. And just as the first time, I went straight into the darkness. I went straight into the sanctuary. And this time I felt much more safe. I felt much more held also by the group, because we had already gotten to know each other very well. And I just felt very protected in a way. And I felt that inside of this sanctuary, there was energies that were supporting us. And that came from allowing myself the sensibility to perceive that. So I put my hands on the altar, and for the next 2 hours, if you want to take it from there, but essentially we stayed in the sanctuary. I stayed in the sanctuary for the full 2 hours that we were there. What was moving through that space for you, that you feel that was, pertinent to what we had been journeying the first 7 days of the trip?
Yeah, that was a very special visit for me as well. We went back because the end is the beginning. And so that is why we returned to that space. And it is a way to reflect on everything that you have moved through, just like what you did of I'm different now. And the way that I feel held in this group is different now. And I'm scared, but maybe I can do it. That was the whole idea. So I'm glad that was your experience. When I stepped into the temple, it was before other people had gone in. So I happened to go in first, which was rare, actually. This is the first time that I ever went ahead of the group. But I went in because I felt called. And after I passed the semi-light part of the temple, which is the opening of the temple, I heard a woman's laughter. And I thought, oh, that's so great that people in our group are feeling so comfortable that they're laughing right now. But it also sounded like it was an echo coming from way over here. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. That's just the way that the sound is reverberating off the walls. And I never looked behind me. So I don't actually know who was behind me or when anybody came in after me. I'm not sure. But I went after offering and moving through each gate and laying an offering down. I got into the sanctuary, and immediately I could smell these herbs and spices and I was breathing in so deeply, trying to identify what it was. It was like anise and cinnamon and cardamom. And I really could not identify all of them, but it was this beautiful blend. And I was so confused by what I was smelling. And I actually thought, oh, maybe a group came here before us and put essential oils on the altar, because a lot of groups do that. We do not do that, but a lot of groups do that. And so I actually smelled the altar, trying to see where is this scent coming from, and it was not the altar. So then I thought, okay, it's actually nothing in the physical. Let me just pause for a moment and see what I can tune into energetically. Because I was walking through that temple mostly with my eyes closed. And the first time that I heard the woman's laughter, I thought, that's Isis. But then I thought, no, it's just someone in our group. Then it was you.
End the story there. It was me.
Then when I was in the sanctuary, when I smelled that, I realized that is actually Isis. And the moment that I thought that to myself, I smiled and I heard her laughter again. The room, it was like a flash went through the room, and then her energy was just in that space. So that was present the whole time that I was there. And it was incredibly magical. I never know what to expect, but that really was this absolute honor and blessing that she was there present with us. And then of course dragons ended up coming through. So those were the two largest energies that I could feel, let alone all of the energies that everyone in the group ended up bringing once they entered the sanctuary space, because it was quite a while that I was in there before other people came in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In one of your channeling after darks, in your membership, there is a moment where you did a specific channeling about the dragons and how they're very different but also similar in the ways of an angel, and how the angels are more present in the day-to-day things, and the dragons, they only come when they're needed in the moment. So what did you feel was being most needed in that space that allowed the energy of a dragon to move through? And you weren't the only one that felt the dragon when it came. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that it was a combination of the collective between each of us, but of course that's a mirror reflection of the collective of humanity. But the collective amount of things to transmute and move through. The dragons are master alchemizers and master transmuters, and the way that they strengthen our nervous system to be able to transmute things is unlike any other energy that I've ever experienced thus far. So that was part of it, but it was paired with the group's ability to transmute. So there was a willingness, and as you mentioned, there was a sense of bravery that each person had. Every single person that night went into the sanctuary. There was not a single person who did not, and there were plenty who did not go in the first time, or who went in and thought, okay, yeah, I've got it, and then they left.
Who did that?
And then they left promptly. But not this time. This time people went in, they stayed in, and they were there for themselves, but also for the collective and group transmutation that was taking place. So that is why I believe the dragons came. And Isis, her energy feels very much, she humanizes everything. She everything that is human, she not only makes it sacred, she also makes it normal. So there's no judgment, and it is also sacred. It's truly, it's beautiful the way that she brings that feels a bit polarizing to me, how something can be so mundane but also sacred, and there is no judgment in any of it. She brings them both together, and that feels like that's where our group was at. And so those were the two that were present that I felt the strongest.
The best way I could describe the role that I found myself in that night was a vessel of alchemy and transmutation, because there was these waves of emotions, the ones that we talked about, rage, grief, even just tremendous joy and love. And I just felt, and it was very special, that in the first journey, there was 4 men representing that pillar, the 4 pillars holding that. It was very emotional to me to think that it's when there's a strong pillar in the presence of the chaotic, flowing feminine nature, that feminine energy can find itself open to receive and open to being, let out in its full gifts and in its full magic. And I just stood in one place the whole time, and the 2 hours went by like this. And the whole time I was just opening my crown and letting light flow, and then pushing it out of my heart to whatever was needed, because I felt like that those emotions, they were being expressed. They in a way brought out a lot of fear in the beginning for me, because I felt that it represented the masculine in me not being able to fully hold all of the feminine, and only being able to hold the aspects that you want to see. So it's the sensuality, the beauty, but not the rage, not the grief, not all of these aspects that are part of that container. And it was like a vessel of, like a pillar of transmutation. And this was around 1 a.m, and we had a flight to Cairo at 4 or 5 a.m. We had to leave the hotel. I hadn't even packed yet. So we left the temple and we were ready to start our second half of the journey. And I just felt that all of the group, we were just up here in the clouds, like not rooted in the third dimension at all. Like, what is time? What is a text message? I was just floating up here. Then to get on a plane, go through security at the airport, it felt a little ungrounding. I felt it difficult to get back into my body. And that's when, like, you as a leader of the group were like, we need a day to just fully be humans, be grounded. You shared with us a few practices to ground, and I just wanted to speak into that, because having these spiritual experiences can in a way bring you outside of that body. And what is that importance of going back into our body, giving ourselves space to integrate all the energies that we just opened up to be able to replenish, refresh, and then keep doing those activations for another 7 days.
Yeah, great. It's really what you said, that if when we do leave our body and we have different experiences and go through different activations, and whether that's us being activated or we are intentionally activating a space, when we move through that, in order to bring that into the real world, which is a question that so many people ask, now that I've done all of this, what does that mean for me in my everyday life? In order to bring that in more peacefully and more harmoniously, we must ground it into ourselves. And we actually miss out on the energetic upgrades and activations that happen if we stay out here too much, because with the amount that we were being activated, it's kind of like a lot of energy is coming in, and there's a stopping point where our cup gets full, and then we have to bring that cup into our body, and we have to integrate it in some fashion. We have to drink the cup and feel what that's like to move through us. Many people had ascension symptoms shortly after that because of that reason.
Which looked like,
well, yeah, different skin symptoms. Rashes happened, which the dragons mentioned might happen because of dragon skin. And then a lot of intestinal issues and stomach issues. And it would hit everybody differently, but everybody knew, oh, this is just ascension symptoms. And it would come maybe for like an hour during the day for some people, and then immediately be gone. And only one person dealt with it for quite a couple of days back to back. But everyone else, it was kind of just, they knew, they trusted, oh, this is a 1-day thing, and I'm going to move in and out of it, and it's going to be okay. And that's one of the reasons. It can be very easy to move through a lot of activations, and then at the very end, when people go back home, they might not be able to do things for like a week, because they have to sleep to integrate now, because of the amount of things that they have moved through. They have to sleep for a week at a time, and that's not very practical for people who need to go back to work. And so I am very practical, double Capricorn here. I'm very practical, and I want to help people make this practical. Energy is something that is beyond the physical and practical world, but it is meant to be part of our everyday life and our everyday world and experience. And so one of the ways that we do that is through grounding practices, which could mean energetic grounding, but it can also mean using the physical world to ground ourselves. And there are so many ways of doing that: walking barefoot, lying down on the earth, using different herbs and spices to kind of bring us back into our body. Many things that we practiced there.
We also use the symbol of the Ankh to help us ground, if you want to share a little bit of that practice.
Sure. Yeah, so that practice came through actually the first time that I was in Egypt. I don't remember who gave that to me. I want to say Isis, because she gave me a lot the first time that I ever went to Egypt. She showed me how to use the Ankh almost as a sense of rooting. So there are many ways to do this actually, but one of the ways that I do it is I imagine an Ankh being around me, and then I bring it down into my body, or I might start the Ankh in my energetic body, always around my heart. The way that I make the Ankh symbol is I always move down first, going all the way down into the root, coming back up to the heart, and then out on either side, and then around, and then I usually end up going back down again to really, for the grounding purposes, to really bring it in. I will also put Ankhs on my feet. I will put Ankhs on my hand if I'm going to connect to the earth in that way as well. And sometimes it's a matter of bringing multiple ankhs into the space that I'm in to ground like a container, essentially. So I will do that for the group very often, where I'm doing energy work while people are experiencing whatever they're experiencing. And usually it's 4 ankh pillars that I'm bringing into the space, and then they are holding a whole grounding energy for the entire group to just bring everybody down. So, yeah.
And then going forward into that second journey, after we had that day of integration, the next day it was like, all right, now we're starting again, going to the Sphinx. We had a very beautiful meditation going to the Sphinx. It was very special to me because now having this realization that all of these sites, the Sphinx, the pyramid, they're living beings that hold a lot of wisdom, a lot of codes. Knowing that the Sphinx used to be this lioness figure, very symbolic, and it felt very connected to my experience when I asked the lion to give me that strength. I went directly to the paw of the Sphinx and was sort of just being in gratitude of the power that a being such as a lion represents. And I know you have a very special connection with the Sphinx. It was the being that told you you're ready to start journeying into Egypt and taking groups with you. Do you feel that there was any messages that the Sphinx had for you this time around? Maybe a little nod of, you're doing it. What was that like to re-meet with this being?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. It's always beautiful to be with that being. I love the Sphinx. I love the Sphinx. And something that was especially significant for me was that I have been to the Sphinx 3 times now with a private visit, which is the only way to be close to that being. And I have never sat between the paws of the Sphinx. And I just never felt called. The groups that I was with, I simply didn't feel called. I would go around to the side of the Sphinx and walk around it, and I would hold the paw, but I never felt called to go in. And so this time, leading a cacao ceremony and meditation in between the paws of the Sphinx, that was my first time ever sitting there, and that's what I was doing. And it felt so symbolic for this being to be so special and sacred to me. And that's the being that invited me to go to Egypt totally unexpectedly. I was not asking at all. And I didn't know that people went to Egypt. I didn't even know people did groups and retreats and all of that stuff. I had no knowledge of that whatsoever. And she invited me to move through that and have my first group there at the Sphinx, to be sitting in between her paws, was deeply symbolic. That would be the first time that I ever sat there, leading a sacred ceremony, inviting people into meditation and inviting people to connect with her energy. And that experience was actually far more energetic for me. But the one piece that she circled back to, the second time that I ever visited her, she gave to me this, she started a conversation with me, and she started talking about the difference between a teacher and a student. And she said, or if you will, a teacher maybe and a master, however you want to perceive that. She said that a teacher or a student who has not yet reached a level of mastery uses tools that are outside of them to try to understand themselves. But the true master or the true teacher knows that all of the tools are inside of them. And so that is where they return to in order to understand themselves or to move through whatever it is they're trying to move through, including alchemical transmutation, etc. And so she kind of brought that conversation back up to me again and was talking about how much I was allowing myself just to be in flow. And as a person who really loves to prepare things, I really couldn't prepare for any part of the days that we were together, because each day was truly like its own plant medicine ceremony. That is how I perceived it. And so you can never know what's going to happen in a plant medicine ceremony. And so she was, in a way, affirming my energy and the way that I was moving through each day as truly being in flow and being in trust of that flow. So that was personally, I mean, yeah, really an honor to be acknowledged and to have that conversation of what it is to be a teacher come back around, because I was practicing what she taught me of, I don't need outside tools to try to plan every moment of what people are going to do. I'm just going to trust the moment and trust that whatever is inside of me and whatever moves me is what is needed for this time and space. So that was a very full circle moment for me.
I think part of the pillars of the path of a master is, let's say someone goes up to you asking a question about maybe themselves, and first going to, what is your heart saying? What is your sacred heart telling you about the situation? What is the metaphor there? That was the thing that, I found you bringing up to the surface of, all of the third dimensional exterior experiences that we live through. If we are just consciousness creating this outward experience, then everything must have a meaning. Everything must have a connection. And you start realizing that inside of every coincidence, or inside of every maybe thing that your ego didn't want happening, there's always a metaphor there. And that was a huge, lesson for me as well, of asking my heart and also asking myself, what's the metaphor? If there's this podcast that gets canceled 2 times in a row, what is that telling me? What is the metaphor there? And listening to my gut. I'm going to skip over the pyramid, but we're going to go back to it, the Great Pyramid, and then go to the Step Pyramid in Saqqara, because that, I think, aligns really well with this trusting my own intuition.
Yes.
When we got into that space, that was, as you described it, the pyramid where we were able to recharge, and we were able to, whatever healing, either physically, emotionally, we were able to ask inside of that pyramid, because it was intentioned that way. And I found myself walking around the pyramid kind of lost, and you can go through corridors, and I really had to track, okay, I just took a left turn, a right turn, because I didn't want to be lost inside of this pyramid. And in one moment I just said, lead me to where I need to go. So I turned back, and there was lights illuminating the corridors, and then certain lights had like flickers. They would just start flickering. So I was like, I'm gonna follow the flickers. I went, took a right. There was this hall where all of the lights were flickering that we later went into all together. And I was like, I'm gonna continue this path, take another right, left, straight, down, forward, back. And then I saw this opening, like a cave, pitch black. And I'm like, my past self would have not even seen that there was a cave there. But now I'm seeing it. So I think I need to go inside. I'm crawling in the cave. I'm like waiting for like this dragon to appear in front of my eyes. And then I hear in a soft voice, I knew you would come. I was like, what? And I'm like, hi, hello. And then it was you. And you're like, I knew you would find us. And we sat there, we had a meditation, and it was really emotional because I asked my guidance to take me where I needed to go. And it took me straight to where you were, and where you guys were having this beautiful meditation ceremony space. And then we were the last ones outside of the pyramid. We came out. It was just after sunset. it just felt pristine is the word I would use to describe. Why are there, well, actually, if you have any reflections over that as well, that experience that I had, that you were feeling into.
Well, yeah, just to share about how I knew you would come. It was actually that morning prior to going in, I just had a vision, and I said, oh, okay, Emilio is going to find me when I'm inside of the pyramid, and we're going to be able to meditate together. So I had considered asking you to come to a certain part of the pyramid prior to receiving that vision, but in response to me wondering that, I guess my guides or my intuition just gave me that vision of Emilio's just going to find you. And I thought, oh, of course he is. I don't need to worry about that. Of course he's just going to find me. If he is meant to, and if he's listening, he's going to find me. And so then I heard your necklace, actually, and I heard footsteps first, and I thought, that's Emilio. And then I heard your necklace as you were calling in, and I was like, there's Emilio. I'm just gonna wait. And I didn't want to scare you because we were in the pitch black, so I called out and said I knew you would be here. Yeah, which was it. That felt like, again, for me as a guide in that time, it felt like a beautiful moment of full circle and recognition, because you could only get there by trusting yourself. You had no idea where you were going, but you had to trust it, and you chose to trust it. And then the next level of challenge was, are you going to go into the pitch black cave that you cannot see the back of? You have no idea what's in there. Are you going to go in there? And then you did. That's a moment of watching someone step into a greater part of their power. So that meant a lot to me.
And after that, the darkness started to become more of like another metaphor for me. And it was those places where you feel a resistance of going there anyway. And that's what the darkness sort of symbolized now for me. Then I was confronted after those days of going into the darkness, moments where I had to go to places where I didn't want to go. And it was that the now human experience test of, are you going to have that conversation that is probably going to bring out some dark aspects that you haven't been wanting to reveal? And also, is that darkness going to hold you back from going there in the first place? And the experience, the journey was teaching me at every moment what darkness was signifying to me. And it was from seeing a past ex on the trip that I hadn't seen in 4 years, just here it is, whoa. Or, having after arriving back home, difficult conversations about, dissolving certain relationships, that because I had realized that internal wholeness had not been established within me, I knew that if I kept going that direction, it was going to be even tougher for me to find wholeness and to find that union of those two polarities. And I'm just curious to know, because you're so comfortable in the darkness, what it means to you and how you've gotten to a space where it's just become also comfortable for you to be in there, even if it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. What I have experienced is that the darkness, in a metaphorical and literal sense, it is really where I am able to confront the biggest part of myself, the deepest part of myself, and the part of myself that it's able to hide the most because it is in the dark, and I'm able to overlook it the easiest because it's cast in shadow. But when I am able to bring those parts out, when I'm able to face those parts, that is when my own power and belief in myself is even stronger, because I now am not carrying something that I am afraid of that is actually just me. And also I'm able to experience the other side of that shadow, because once I uncover that shadow, there is another part of light that comes to match it. That is, this is the gift that is available to you here. And the only way to extract that gift is to go into the dark, to excavate through the darkness and trust that whatever it is you're pulling out, you're going to leave behind the stuff that doesn't serve you, and you're going to keep the gems with you. And then you're going to leave from that darkness, you're going to fly away, and you're going to go up to the heights. You're going to go up to a space that's even higher and see yourself from a different perspective and look at what you have brought with you and say, wow, I had no idea that I had this in me because it was stuck in the darkness. So it's learning and uncovering greater and greater aspects of ourselves that simply cannot happen when we only live in the light.
At what moments of people's life do you think that the darkness calls them in the most?
Well, the first place is during adolescence, actually. And that's one of the reasons why I perceive that as one of the most potent and important parts of a human's life is during adolescence, because the physical body is changing so much, and physiologically what is happening in the brain and in the nervous system, it is being rewired and configured in such a way that up to that point, the person is completely unaccustomed to. When a person is guided, though, to go into darkness during that time, you're not really afraid of a lot else after that. You're able to move through a lot. And I think that that's part of the blessing that I have of being raised in a lot of darkness. I went through a lot of darkness very early, and I did move through it during adolescence. And that does not mean that I have not faced darkness past that time, but I am more comfortable with it because I faced kind of as dark as you can go, which was the desire to not even be here anymore, and really confronting, am I just going to leave or am I going to stay? When you face that and then get out of that yourself, you have a different understanding and strength within you. So adolescence to me is a time to, it's the time when someone is the most vulnerable, and it's the time when they can be equipped with the most tools and therefore feel the strongest to move through things. But of course, past adolescence, anytime there is a loss, a significant loss in someone's life, because a loss, whether it is a physical loss in terms of like home, so maybe you lose your home or maybe you lose your job, or if it's a loss of a loved one, that's actually a part of you that you're now losing. And that means that you have to perceive yourself differently without this thing or this person in your life. And that is very confronting, especially if someone, as you mentioned, if someone does have the 1+1 and it's outside of them, if they lose that one, whether it's their mother or a sibling or a significant partner, if they lose that, their anchor is gone. And now they're free floating and they have no idea what to do because they haven't experienced that and they haven't moved through it. But those are initiations in our life. That's what an initiation is moving through the darkness, moving through the challenge and the fire, and not knowing for sure what is on the other side, but choosing to go through it anyway, trusting that you are guiding yourself, that you are being guided, and that you're going to make it through.
And it's almost like when we witness the darkness in ourselves, we can perceive it more in the external world, and sometimes even situations or events or moments that don't necessarily involve us. So what is that also stage or perception when we go inside of our own darkness? We can perceive it also around us, and maybe certain people we can tell when the shadow's coming through, or in global events we're seeing the darkness and the shadow come out of humanity. How have you found a good way to navigate that?
See, because I have moved through so much darkness and continue to, that's an ongoing, lifelong practice that I will hold, and there will forever be deeper and deeper levels to go into and more heights to reach as well within all beings. That has given me so much more compassion, because as you mentioned, when we see it in a person outside of us or in the collective, I've been in that dark space. And so when I see it in another, I think, yeah, I've been there. There is that beautiful quote, nothing that is human is alien to me. There is no amount of darkness that a person can experience that would ever cast them outside of a circle for me. There's no amount of darkness that someone can experience or move through or create in their own life, or chaos that they could create, that would make me want to push them away, because it's human. If someone is doing it, it is human, which means there is an aspect of myself there. And whether or not I understand it, I can have compassion. But the more darkness that I explore and the more that I extract from my own darkness, the deeper my compassion grows.
There's an interesting connection between what you're talking about of that perception of the darkness with dragons as well. You've mentioned they have this ability to perceive beyond time and space, and that they're able to see the width of all the perspectives and bringing that into neutrality. So the more, and I've heard you say, the more we get activated by the dragon energy or have indirect contact or teachings with this energy, we're able to see things through that neutral lens, which is, in my opinion, the goal of all of this, because you can get so swayed in the polarity of what's going on in the world. You know, we have different types of presidential elections and things like that that create this sense of disharmony between us, between the species. So how are dragons inviting us to view things more from that perspective of neutrality?
Yeah, beautiful. So neutrality is also a form of wisdom, because you are able to see something from all of the angles. And the visual that comes through about the way that they perceive things is almost as if their eyes are infinitely faceted, which is why they're able to see every perspective, because they can hone in on one facet or one side of something and understand it from that. But their greater perspective is that they can see everything. So for us, as we mentioned, the outside of the temple is the chaotic world and the inside is the harmonious world. That's a bit like what dragons give to us. They give to us a space of being in a sacred space, being in a space of harmony within our own sphere and our own energetic field, so that we feel harmonious even amidst all of the chaos. And they have talked about how that is necessary. Pairing love and wisdom is necessary, and pairing a sense of strength and purpose is necessary during this time, because amidst all of the chaos, we can feel helpless, we can feel weak, we can feel hopeless, and we can feel like our one self doesn't really make a difference. But when we invite that dragon energy in, we feel the strength of our own power. It doesn't matter that we are only one being. The amount that we are able to change within ourselves and therefore within the collective, it's infinite. There's an infinite amount of space that we are able to do that in. And of course, when we come together as a collective, it's even better. It's even bigger when we do that together as a group. But that is really what the dragons welcome us to do.
Beautiful. And the Great Pyramid is coming into my field right now, because that was a really activating experience for me. We did a beautiful walking meditation around the whole Giza plateau. So every single pyramid, we got the chance to acknowledge it, to give it our prayers, and you were guided to separate the group in half when we entered that space. So one group would go down to the subterranean, the other group would go up to the King's Chamber. I went down to the subterranean first. There was this interesting kind of canal that led to I don't know where, but when we got down to the subterranean, you told me you should go in there. You should check that out. What is that canal also representing? Because it was, again, for me, going into the darkness.
Yeah. Again,
it was this small, tight little corridor that just went for I don't know how many meters.
Did you make it to the back?
I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't make it to the very back because I didn't know how far it went. I was like, I'm going to end up in Aswan again if I just keep crawling this thing. But eventually someone that did make it to the end told me, oh yeah, there was like a little wall that you could touch. Again, what was the significance of that canal? Because the subterranean has a very weird shape. It's almost like a water pump. Yeah. So I don't know where you want to take us with that, of the significance of both going into that space while simultaneously having a group up in the King's Chamber activating as well.
So the There are so many ways that we could look at the pyramid. In this particular time, I'm going to look at it from the perspective of an initiatic space of moving through the body of a being. So that space was used as a pump. And in this case, that pump, if you will, was being used energetically. So my understanding is that we go to the bottom of the pyramid first to activate our own self, but it's also to activate the being, just like how we could do mula bandhas and grip the bottom of our self, and activating our root chakra as well. We do that first because it's the beginning. It's the bottom and the most depth down. And so we went there, and it is actually subterranean. It is underneath the earth. We went there while the group in the top was able to receive the activation from us being down there. So, and then they simultaneously were able to activate the rest of the pyramid through the vocalizing and chanting they were doing. That subterranean chamber and that whole space, it is one of my favorite places, maybe in the world. And it is pitch black when you turn off all the lights as well, which is I like dark spaces, apparently. The far back corridor, though, it is on the farthest wall, so you have to move through the space, go to the far back wall, and it is very narrow. You have to crawl on hands and knees, and some people who are larger than me would have a very difficult time maneuvering through that because it's very narrow. I happen to be petite, so I'm able to fit in there somewhat easily, but I'm still crawling on hands and knees, or sometimes army crawling, depending. That space for me represents the womb. And it is a space where once you enter into that, you are in a space of the pyramid itself, of that being, to then face what is within you that has been waiting to die and waiting to turn to ash, such as the phoenix. When you come back out, though, you are able to be reborn, but you're still in the dark. You're still not able to see everything. So it's a bit like you're still blind, but you've been reborn, and you are kind of feeling your way literally through the dark to understand who you are now that you're in this new space. Who are you, and how do you relate to the dark? So again, I often do not encourage people to do things, but I did know that you needed to go in there, and that you probably wouldn't if you did not have a little nudge from the physical. And so that's why I encouraged you to go in there. And I'm glad that you were brave enough to do it.
Yeah, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, because as soon as, a few people felt that brave calling of going in that corridor, and then I was like, all right, I'll go. So I waited in my line, and then all of a sudden I just start seeing people do the reverse, crawling backwards out. And I was like, what's in there? What is in there? So I said, all right, I'll lead. I'll go in first. And while I was in there crawling, I start hearing the chanting and the songs from the group that was in the king's chamber. And I was not tripping. I literally felt that the whole pyramid was moving back and forth, back and forth. I was completely sober. I was just feeling the vibration of the whole pyramid. And then when we get to that point that all of these pyramids and Sphinx and temples are beings as well, why was the pyramid moving with us harmonizing inside of it?
Well, the way I interpret it is that it is also, it's responding to what's happening in it, to that movement and that liminal space. It's showing that you're actually entering into the non-physical, because things are not actually solid. We perceive them as solid from the third dimension, but in actuality they're not. In actuality, they are moving back and forth. They are in a wave state, and we just don't perceive them that way. So for you to have perceived that, which not everybody in the pyramid probably did have that experience that night. They didn't have that perception that it was swaying, or in its natural state of vibrational wave, I should say, but you were able to perceive that. And being in that specific canal, when you go in there, you're able to perceive a lot, because you are so deep inside of that being. And because it is, I perceive it as a sovereign being, the fact that it showed you that it was in its state actually means that it wanted you to know that the group was so harmonious and the group was resonating so well that it could enter into that space and that you would be able to perceive it in that way. So when anything like that happens for me in a sacred space like that, I take that as an honor because the being is showing its true self to me. So the fact that you were willing to face your darkness and go in very bravely and lead the other people who couldn't go in there first, the pyramid said, great, let's show him what we really are.
I felt it. It was responding to us. And when it was time to move up to the king's chamber, the first time I went to the pyramid a few months before, I remember going up the grand gallery, and I just like went like crawling and like going fast, not in the way that we had been entering the temples before, which was very consciously breathing one foot after the other. And you also encourage us to go up that gallery and being super conscious of each step. And I think you were behind me when I went up the grand gallery, and you said something to me after, which was, it was really beautiful to see you ascend. What is the metaphor there of when we go up the grand gallery? Why did you perceive it as an ascension? Where were we ascending to?
So I look at each part of the pyramid, again, related, in this format. So there are many ways to perceive the pyramid, but from this perspective of it being an initiatic entrance into a being, each part of the pyramid represents a different chakra. So that the movement through the grand gallery is actually us moving from our willpower, which are the lower three chakras, which means it's our human base self, moving up into the heart space. And so when we do that, we are ascending into what some people might call the fifth dimension, because the heart space is what rules the fifth dimension, if you will. It is a space of love and transparency and heart energy. So moving up into that means that we are ascending into a higher part of ourself, that we are choosing to live from our heart and perceive from our heart, rather than live from the base instincts of our body, or only perceiving from our mind, which can be rooted in a unhealthy way through our nervous system, in a space of fight or flight, etc. So yeah, watching you go up and encouraging each person who did go up, once they got to the top, to turn around and look at where they had come from, because that ascent is physically, it is quite monumental. It's very challenging physically. It is a lot to go up there, and the higher you go, the hotter it becomes and the more out of breath you are. But to turn around and see where you came from, and to recognize that that was your sovereign choice with your willpower to bring yourself up into your heart and to choose to be there and acknowledge who you are and who you are now becoming, there is nothing like that. So watching you ascend was beautiful.
And once we got into the heart, then it was time to activate the throat. So we turned off all the lights in the king's chamber. I'd never walked into it with lights off. So I'm like struggling, where was the sarcophagus again? Where is that box? And then we all got the opportunity to go inside. But while we were in that circle around the box, I really did feel that I wasn't able to tune in to the power of my voice. Something there was, in a way, holding me back, like feeling that I wasn't really able to be harmonizing with the group. And that was a challenge that I was moving through in the King's Chamber, because I knew that was the time where we're meant to be harmonizing with the group. And there were beautiful singers in the group. There were beautiful voices. And I just felt like, I need to really like that of the voice.
Yeah.
And finding that. So the whole maybe like 30-40 minutes we were in there, maybe a bit more, it was like me finding that rhythm of my own voice of what's gonna work here. Where can I take my voice? Can I hit those high pitches? I realized some I couldn't reach, but it was also about finding the unique harmonic blueprint that is our voice. Like our voice carries this resonance of our soul, and that every voice is different. And I was in a way judging my voice for, you know, the few first minutes that we were in there, trying to reach these high notes, trying to get into the harmony of everyone. And finally it was just a let go process of this is where my voice is right now. I understand that our voice carries power and we can utilize it to materialize, to create in the world, when it's coming also purely from the heart. So that was a very special moment.
That's powerful.
Regarding the throat. And then it was time to leave. And, you know, we were one of the few people outside, going outside of the pyramid. And I walk outside and, you know, I'm just acknowledging like, we're in Egypt, bro. Like, we're here. We are here. And I look up and most of the group was already in the bus in the distance. And we look up, I see this like shape of like it looked like a kite. So the shape that I was seeing was a kite like this, like a triangle without a base. And then there was like white little spots beneath the craft. Oh, I spoiled it. I spoiled it. The kite. And I was like, oh, that's a beautiful, like, who's flying a kite right now? And then I was like, there's no one here. Like the temple guardians or the pyramid guards are all around us. Who would be flying a kite? It's midnight.
Yeah.
And then I looked up and it was like almost like this. It was in the clouds, closer than an airplane would be, making absolutely zero noise. And it was just hovering slowly. It wasn't staying in one place. It was definitely moving. And then I realized that those spots that I saw were actually lights coming out of an object. And I was like, bro, it's a UFO. It's a UFO. And I realized, and I got tingles when I saw it. I was in shock, and I was like, am I having my first? Take me with you.
First encounter.
And they went on the other side of the pyramid, and then it disappeared. We didn't see it again. But yeah, I don't think we've talked about like what you felt into that craft was. I have a bit of an idea. Obviously, it was not human. Maybe it was a human man-made craft. But I did feel a sense of acknowledgement of the work that we did that night. And it was like an icing on the cake, like put a ribbon on it and the night there.
Yeah, you know, Egypt it's the place that I've gone and I've seen the most UFOs ever. When I haven't been looking or trying, I'm like, that is a UFO right there. And there's another one over there. It's kind of ridiculous, actually, how many UFOs you can see in Egypt. That close of an experience, though, I have not yet had in Egypt. So that is a blessing for you. And it does feel like an acknowledgement, because just as the pyramid didn't need to show that it was moving, that ship didn't actually need to show itself to you. It could have remained invisible. It didn't need to show itself, but it did. And I actually have not yet tuned in to find out who was there, but we had multiple visitors and multiple different beings that came through at different times. So I've been curious, but it actually feels, at first I was thinking it could have been the Greys or beings from Zeta Reticula. But I actually think that it was, they feel, when I have tuned into it, they feel much taller. So I think it was actually the tall Greys that were in that ship. That is what it actually feels like to me, rather than the small Greys. Yeah.
And why do you feel they were there with us that night? Well, or observing?
They were with us throughout the journey. They ended up, or at least they ended up showing themselves throughout the journey. Once we got to Cairo, really, they ended up coming through very strongly for multiple people in the group. They ended up coming through. And those beings tend to be involved with, at least my understanding, they tend to be involved with upgrades for humans, but they also are involved in the what some people know as the Essassani, or like the hybrids of humans and then gray beings together. They are involved in the hybridization process because they are master biologists and masters with genomes, essentially. So I take that as they're acknowledging our own upgrades and possibly assisting with that, because multiple people ended up having dream-like or astral experiences with them later, where that's what was going on. So,
well, I'll share mine.
Yeah, please.
You know, when we got to Cairo, it was one of the first nights we were there, and I think the shift from going to like the peaceful boat and then, you know, the serenity around Aswan to the chaos, the traffic, Cairo, it's, you know, it's a chaotic energy.
Very intense.
And my sleep pattern was already very weird that whole week. I've never intentionally tried to astral travel or get out of my body, but I have learned a lot about it. And one of the things that I've learned is that sleep paralysis, people that have sleep paralysis, that's the gateway to be able to then astral project. But I've never had sleep paralysis before, so I always like was very curious and, you know, wondered if, you know, if I have that experience, cool, like I'll see what I'll do when it happens. But one of the first nights in Cairo, in Mina House, I woke up in the middle of the night. I don't know what time it might have been, maybe 2, 3 in the morning. And I could not physically move my body. And I was trying to verbalize, yell, speak.
It's kind of scary.
With my roommate, I was trying to say his name. I couldn't say anything. And then all of a sudden, to my right, I just feel like a presence. And it's almost like when there's not good Wi-Fi connection, there was this like kind of muffled voice. It was like trying to say something or verbalize words. I heard the words, but I couldn't understand anything that it was saying. And then that's when I got like a little bit freaked out, because I was like, am I being psychically attacked right now? I can't move. Like, what's going on? And I wanted to bring that story to the surface because maybe I know for a fact some people in our trip had that experience as well, but also collectively, you know, sleep paralysis is a thing that many people have, especially when they're opening up psychically. What and now me reflecting that story to you, what do you feel that was maybe in connection with this UFO encounter, rays that you talked about? What do you think that was?
So I want to also speak on sleep paralysis. Part of the reason why that's the gateway is because your consciousness has come back online while your body stays asleep. So that's why it's actually quite amazing when that happens, but it does feel scary, especially if you're unprepared for it, or even if you've experienced it many times, you're like, I can't move, but I'm awake. That's a time to just try to calm and see what you can experience, if as best you can. And the more that you meditate, the more that becomes a little easier, because you turn off the analytical mind and you're able to be a little bit more relaxed while your body is asleep, really, but you're fully awake. So it makes sense that you would have experienced that and then had this experience with this being. And the way that I perceive that, apart from the potential upgrades or activations that could have been taking place, it's really about exposure, like kind of plain and simple. It's about exposure. So because we are preparing for first contact, the people who are able to receive that more easily are going to be prepared over the next 2 or 3 years or so, very, very strongly, because the ones who are able to accept that there are other beings out there and not be frightened by them, and actually be able to be a bit like an ambassador and a mediator between between galactic beings and then human beings, the better. The more people that are prepared for that, the better that it will be for everyone, including the galactic beings. So for me, I just take that as exposure. You like exposure therapy. You're exposed to something that you're frightened of, and then you stop being frightened of it. So it does feel scary when you're first encountering it, especially if you're in a vulnerable situation like sleep paralysis. You feel like, what's going to happen? They're going to take me. But the more you get exposed, and even hearing whatever it was, though it was muffled, your subconscious received whatever was being spoken. And that I find those experiences very interesting. I'm so curious about what is it that they're actually saying, what, because there's a transmission that they're giving, and I'm curious what the energy is, but it's, again, it's all exposure. That's how I take it.
What have you received in terms of what would be on the other side of that open contact occurring, and having more people exposed to these types of experiences personally, but when it becomes a thing, let's say when it becomes a thing, what do you foresee might be that aftermath of having an open contact with galactic races, and maybe even living amongst them at some point in our lives?
Yeah, that's like a very far future experience. I imagine very far future. Really, we can, historically, we can look at that there was total open contact and open understanding and relationship, and then that was completely shut down, and then religion was placed over everything, so everybody became very, very frightened, firstly, and also totally disbelieved in anything outside of the earth. So those two things together have to come undone through humanity. And now, in the past however many years, however long this has been happening, where people have been being visited, once news became global, and so newspapers and stories, etc., were spread around the world, and now, of course, we have social media spread around the world, the more stories there are going to be about people having different experiences with extra dimensional beings and with galactic beings in physical and in non-physical form. That process has been very, very slow and very, very isolated, for good reason. And part of it is there are always multiple reasons to everything, but part of it is also the energy of the planet and the energy of the collective was not ready for something bigger than that. But so many people now are actually inviting open contact and asking for open contact to happen in a much bigger way. And humanity is much more prepared for that, for, again, many reasons. But one of the reasons being acclimated to differences between people. So the world is much more global. And so seeing different types of people and different ways of living, different ways of expressing physically, verbally, etc., that's all exposure just on a human level. That if humans can't accept a human expressing themselves differently, how is that going to be when a totally non-human being comes in? That's incongruent if we can't even accept those humans. But that's changing because the world has become so global. And so the open contact experiences that are going to be happening, it is still going to be somewhat slow, but it's going to be experiences where people who have a lot of other people who trust them, such as yourself, once you have more experiences like that, and let's just say you end up having a full contact experience and you're interacting with certain beings, you might then come back to the collective and say, this is the message that was shared with me from this group of beings. The more that happens, the more that people are going to be able to trust it, and they're not going to feel as scared, because the human energy of fear, it can actually impact certain beings who are extra dimensional. That's one of the reasons why there's all of this talk of raising your energy. Yes, it's about being in tune with the earth. And also, if you're going to interface with galactic beings, your energy has to be a vibrational match for them. And the energy of fear is so low and so dense, it can't match where they are. And so that actually, not only could that prohibit you from even interacting with them, but even if they came farther down, it actually could be dangerous for them. So people like yourself being exposed to that slowly over time and then welcoming other people into that, that's going to help the collective, so that then eventually, as you mentioned, yeah, maybe we will be living amongst them. But I think that they're here to remind us of what we are capable of, and also share a lot of things that right now humanity's not exactly ready for. A lot of truth and things that have been hidden away about our history and about us as beings and us and our bodies, of what we're capable of. They're helping bring that more back online. So that also means that humanity has to be more open-minded, more curious about that, and just not as fearful.
And that's also bringing us into the ancient past as well, because maybe it's not even the first time we've had this open contact, and there have been specific let's call them Stargate portals. You mentioned that there was around 139, 142 on Earth, built, some destroyed. That also takes us into our culmination of our journey, which was in Abu Ghorab in the Sun Temple on the solar eclipse. Where were we there? What was the significance of doing it there? And how it was related to the Stargates that would lead us to open contact.
Yeah. So Abu Ghorab is a Stargate, what was once used as a Stargate and is still a Stargate. It's just deactivated, but can still be used, but not in quite the same way as it once could. And that's actually why that temple space and the pyramid that was with it is like exploded. It looks
imploded from within. Yeah.
It looks very destroyed. And all of these massive, huge, heavy stone, what look like bowls, are spread throughout and like conglomerated in certain spaces. But when I sat on that Stargate, on the altar, I saw the way that the temple looked before, and those were all spread around in a around the outside in the perimeter, and it actually allowed energy as well as water to flow between it, which is part of what activated the Stargate to begin with. So it really incredible. I should probably talk about that sometime in a video. We went there on that day because I was told to. I was invited to, and being at the Sun Temple on the eclipse meant that we were also able to bring through more dragon energy. And something that was actually really beautiful after that experience, when I was integrating a bit still when I was in Egypt, I did a meditation to integrate that specific experience. And my guides came through and actually shared that what we did that day was an opening of that Stargate and a bringing in of dragon energy for the whole planet. And I had no idea that it was actually that monumental. I just thought, this is great that the group that's here and whoever listens to this meditation is going to be able to access this. But it turned out that it actually was for the planet because of, and they explained this a little bit to me then, but because of essentially the alignment of the sun and the trajectory of the previous solar eclipses that have happened, and then where this one was, because it was in South America. I'm not entirely sure how that's all related, but it was very monumental. And so it was, I mean, what an honor to have been there and to have been doing that on that day. That's just incredible to me. But that was a massive activation for all of us. And it turned out that the Zeta Reticulans came through very unexpectedly. I had never interacted with them before. And they came through to lead that activation. It was, yeah, a beautiful surprise.
It was funny when we first got there, you know, it was sort of like free for all, like go explore. I went straight to that sun disc or whatever, like the disc. What would you call it?
Altar?
Like an altar disc.
Yeah.
And I like climbed on it. I was like feeling like a lion again, stood on it. And all of a sudden I'm getting yelled at by the guards. Get off, get off, get off, get off. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's probably disappearing in and out of reality. But they know the potence of this space. And especially when you talked about there was a pyramid behind it that was imploded. When one of the guards wasn't looking, I went inside and I climbed it. I saw a red fox climbing up the pyramid. Got kind of scared because I'm like, that's a fox. I don't know what foxes do when they're mad. Went back out, and then I told you there's a fox. And then that's when the guards were like, they picked up on that, you know, people were going inside, and they were like, no. Ended up going inside anyways. A bit later, we did a light language activation with someone that was in the group that felt she needed to be there and do that activation. But when you guided the meditation, it did feel very different from the Pleiadian priestesses, the guides. It felt like the energy was very different. I think your body was also afterwards acclimating to that new energy that you just channeled. What What were
Yes, it
you
was.
feeling when that meditation finished?
Well, I was buzzing. I was absolutely buzzing. And I also was like on cloud nine. I actually felt there was one part of me that was like, you're so irresponsible. You're supposed to lead these people. You have to like ground yourself and be present and be here for them and check in with them. But I couldn't. I was so, and everyone was fine. Everyone was okay. But I was so lifted from that and so activated from all of the energy that had just come through and from interacting with those beings that I had never interacted with before, and then also receiving the dragon energy on top of all of that. I was so lifted from it. I was truly blissed out. I was buzzing with joy, and I could feel how important that experience was for me and for the group, but also I could feel it for the collective. But it felt kind of like I interpreted that energy of it's just like when someone does a personal healing for themselves. It is for themselves and it's for the collective. So I just thought, oh, that's just kind of exaggerated in me right now. I'm just really seeing that. But then learning later that it's the reason why that was so strong in me was actually because it was an activation for the planet. It actually really, it floored me, which is why of course I felt called to doing an integrative meditation for that experience, because I didn't do that for everything, but I had to do it for that and understand who was talking to me and what was the energy. And when somebody asked me after, what was the energy you were feeling, the only way I could describe it was as electric rose energy. That was it. That was the only way to describe it. And when I ended up doing that meditation later and tuning in to that energy that I was receiving, it turns out that was the dragons. Those were the dragons that were coming through. Because at first I was associating it only with the Zeta Reticulans, and I thought, that doesn't feel very like a match. Like short grays and electric rose, just those pairs don't go together. But it was because it was the dragons. That was the electric rose.
And you were seeing all these dragons come through.
Yeah.
Were they coming through from the sun?
So
or
that was
like a portal?
That's what it looked like. It was a really amazing visual experience for me. It was quite active. They were behind me. And the sun was behind me. Yeah, the sun was behind me. And that's part of the reason why they were as well. So I could see the eclipse slowly moving, and the shadow, when it covered it, just before the shadow fully covered the sun. The dragon said to my consciousness that was there, okay, we're ready to come through. And I was like, no, but it's not actually the solar eclipse yet. Which is such an egoic thing to say, like, I'm going to control this dragons. Don't come through yet. Wait.
Really? What's the password before you come in?
Really? That's just so egoic. It's so funny. I have to laugh. So they were, of course, patient. They were like, all right, okay, well, we'll just be here. And it was a few seconds, maybe a minute later or something. Then the Zeta Reticulans, the beings that were speaking through me, I don't remember what they said, but they said, okay, like activation now. And I remember my body shaking a lot. And in that moment, the dragons just came down. They came through and then around, and it was like they were swirling around us, but I could see them around the planet. And there were certain places in the planet where they were spiraling more, and I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if there was just a greater concentration of energy there, or if there were vortex points. It was all happening very quickly, so I don't even know what places on the globe now they were going to. But visually, it was very activating. It was amazing, quite stimulating.
That was sort of the end of that journey. That was like the ending point, bringing it all together. We had a sharing circle on the last day, and I woke up extremely sick, like stomach issue, going to the bathroom throughout the night. It was rough going through that, and I wanted to be fully there with all of you in the sharing circle. I could only just lie down like a corpse. And
a deeply activated corpse.
An activated corpse with dragon energy running
coursing
through
you.
But it was a very special moment for me, because when we got toward the end of the sharing circle and every almost every woman that shared something, they thanked the men in the circle. And every time I heard the thank you from a woman of our energy being present there, it just shattered me. It was I was just breaking down. I was like a corpse on the grass crying. And I was like just processing a lot, because I feel that was very healing to feel and hear the reflection of a woman acknowledging the support that we had. And even if it wasn't like very direct support, it was energetic support, or it was maybe just the presence, the pillar that we were holding. It was very emotional. I can even like just tune into that energy now of feeling like almost a little unworthy to receive that because of the mistakes I had made in the past. And yeah, it was beautiful, at the same time very confronting. And I think the tears that were coming were like my heart telling me, allow yourself to receive this compliment or acknowledgement or whatever they were saying. That was witnessing the masculine of the group holding the space that we held. And how did you perceive that? What are some reflections you had on that moment?
Well, I'm so glad that you're bringing that through, because when you were talking about the masculine and feminine earlier, the beauty of the masculine and feminine, when they are in balance and when they are both honored and both serving in the way that they are meant to. The masculine is meant to be the container or the pillar, holding this energy to allow the feminine to come through and simply be a witness to the magnificence of the feminine. Because the feminine, it is everything that is intangible. It is actually the darkness. So in a yin and yang, it is the dark side of that shape. And it is everything that it can be manifest, that is not yet. It is the potential. And so there is chaos in that. In the nothing, anything can come from that. And so sometimes that does mean rage, or that does mean grief. And sometimes that means absolute chaos or madness, just being completely misunderstood and confused. But when the masculine is strong in itself and can hold that container and simply be a witness, that is when the storm of the feminine can just move the way that it's meant to. And then the storm passes. The clouds part, the sun comes back out, and the feminine returns that witnessing and witnesses the masculine and says, thank you for seeing me and just holding me in that. That then makes the masculine feel seen and witnessed and purposeful. And it is this beautiful return of energy and reciprocal dance back and forth of both beings being witnessed. It's what allows for unity, and it's what allows for a healthy and harmonious system actually to happen, is when both of those energies get to be fully expressed and fully honored in what they are, without one of them trying to squash or lessen whatever part that they witness in that. Without that happening, there is beauty and there is full honoring, as there was in that circle. And you did hold that. And grew into that container too.
Yeah, and when that circle finished, the only energy I had left in my body, I directed it toward the pyramid, and I just bowed. Like I just bowed to the pyramid, and I just felt this sense of humility that this great being was representing, and how it had opened its doors for us, its body for us to walk in, and how also hurt it has been before with people that have gone in with not the best of intentions, and how it's been just used as this wonder of the world that you go, you take your picture, you leave, never getting witnessed. It's just there now. It's just this mystery pyramid that I'm thankful that now people are getting to recognize the true power it holds, and the immense just gratitude I had bowing in on the grass to the land of Egypt for always just opening my arms to me. Like, it feels like home. Like, it literally feels like this space that I can just go to, and it's welcome me in such a beautiful way, and just feeling so much gratitude for you for even feeling the call to get this group together. It was powerful. It was very powerful. I have no words to even describe what that being is, or just seeing it, witnessing it. It was very beautiful, very beautiful. I have no words right now, but just acknowledging that, and acknowledging that moment that was like the perfect way to end the trip. Was just falling in deep like surrender to the land and to the pyramid itself, and also witnessing the act of bowing, which someone in the group bowed in a similar way, that also just opened my heart, just witnessing what a bow can do. Yeah, it was very activating, very emotional.
It was the perfect way to end, as we started, in reverence and honor.
Gratitude.
And gratitude, always.
I know that the three guides wanted to make a special appearance. We just
for you.
Wipe the tears before they come in. But yeah, just inviting this space to bring them in also, because I feel they might have a very different perspective, because them being contemporaries of Thoth at the time, ancient Atlantis, seeing how these initiations were played out in ancient times, and how they're also getting to witness us doing it. I feel like it's very special that they also get the chance to share with us their own wisdom and perspective on really the work that us and a lot of other groups that are going to these sites, and also just activating from their own home, watching this, they're receiving the codes that we received in Egypt. We're sharing them energetically, opening the space for that. If you could call it
beautiful. Yes, they actually are already, just pause, already talking about something. So talking about initiations right now. Yeah, just a moment.
Beautiful family. Thank you so much, first of all, just for witnessing me in my emotion. I was overtook by feeling what was going on the moment I bowed to that pyramid. And as we're heading into this channeling with the three guides, you'll be able to watch that and access that on Eluña's channel. It's going to be a very, very powerful channeling. I was hot, I was cold, I was shivering, all the feels, and you're probably going to feel the same. So I really encourage you guys to go check that out on her channel. I will link that in the description where you can find that. Subscribe, like, comment, all the YouTube things that we're doing on here. But first of all, just loving all of you for witnessing our journey. This was one of the most vulnerable podcasts that I've done to date, and it was very special sharing it with such a precious, magical being that Eluña is. And I look forward to many, many more intimate conversations like these, and seeing you on the other side of this. Love you guys. Welcome back.
Thank you. I was gone.
How are you feeling?
Landing.
In the spirit of the Just Tapping podcast, we're going to end with a final trio. Before getting into that, I was just tuning into it, maybe going through the final trio, and also at the end, if there's any questions that you might have for me about the journey, Egypt. I'm an open book. Anything that you want to ask me about. But before going into all of that, where would you send people to connect with you, with these beautiful, magnificent journeys that you are now leading, all the channeling that you're coming through with, anything that you feel called to share, to send people to?
Yeah. I can easily be found on YouTube, Eluña Noel, on YouTube. And I also have a website, eluñanoel.com. So there is, as you mentioned, there's a membership. So people who want to go deeper into my work, with the series that I do only for my members is called Channeling After Dark. That's part of the membership. But also I do different live events where I am just with my community. So I do meditations and live Q&As, and I also offer one-on-one readings and group readings actually as well. So all of that can be found at my website, and I'm on Instagram if people want to follow me on there too.
Beautiful.
And my website is where people can read about the most recent journey that we just did, and there will be more information about the future journeys that I do.
Yeah, a lot more to come.
Yeah.
This is just the beginning. The first question I had for you was, what is something that you experienced in Egypt that you wish all people experienced?
That's like choosing a favorite. It's very hard for me. Okay. I have to say two things. Sorry. The first is truly the reverence that can be experienced before entering a sacred space, and how that reverence empties you, and how that allows you to connect with something greater than yourself, especially for people who have not yet connected with their guides, or even for people who want to connect with something beyond themselves. The path that I have found is through reverence. And Egypt, really, when you go to that land, it is wide open when you enter with that. When you enter just with gratitude in your heart, and you're fully open to receiving what is available to you, and you honor what is there and what has been there, it gives and gives and just keeps giving. That energy and the way that changes your experience of yourself as a sacred being and of this life as sacred, there is nothing like that. Our life is sacred. And yes, it's mundane, but that's because the mundane is sacred. And going to Egypt and having ceremonies and understanding what that feels like, it changes your life. So that is the first piece. And the second piece, I want everyone on earth to feel the word that I always say, which I thought I would only ever say this to my group in Egypt, but here I am on camera. It's a heartgasm. I want everyone to have a heartgasm from beauty and gratitude, because that is the gift that I was given after our final sharing circle. When I went back and I had some time just for myself and I was meditating, I was doubled over and weeping from the gratitude and the beauty and how strongly my heart was feeling that. And I want every single person to experience that.
You put it into words of what I experienced when I bowed to the pyramid. That was it. And it started in reverence. So many connections.
Yeah.
Second question I have for you is, towards what emerging vision is humanity's heart leading us towards most strongly right now?
You and your questions. I think toward harmony in self. And harmony means that there is coherence, that there is understanding, that there is peace. harmony can only be present, and all of those things can only be present with harmony. And harmony implies that there is a sense of order. And something that I always say is order is beauty. And we are moving toward a more beautiful future. We are moving toward what is true beauty, not the false beauty, not the pretend beauty. What is true beauty? And as you just said and experienced, it comes through reverence and it comes through gratitude.
Last question for today. What does a heartgasm feel like?
Oh, it, wow, you're really putting me on the spot. I will say it feels truly, well, I am a woman, so I've only ever had a woman's orgasm, but it feels similar to a physical orgasm. There are muscles, it feels like energetic muscles that pulse and undulate when I am having a heartgasm, and each pulse is another wave of energy that is ecstasy. So it is like a wave going down that still feels ecstatic, and then it lifts you back up again, and you're truly, what I experience is I never knew that much ecstasy was possible. And then you go back down again, and it's a little bit of relief because you go so high that you kind of want this break, but then it lifts you back up again. And that is all happening energetically in my heart center. And it really feels very physical. It feels like a physical orgasm, but it's all right here, just happening energetically, and it's ecstasy. Yeah.
May you remember your heartgasm. That's it.
Yes, my wish for all.
Is there any question or reflection that you would want out of me from this whole conversation, or anything that's on your heart?
Yeah, I am so grateful that you're giving me the space to ask. I want to know, just very, really quite plainly, who were you before, and who are you now? How do you see yourself? How did you see yourself before? And how do you see yourself now?
That's a good question. I feel like it's a new iteration of who I was prior to being in Egypt. For me, it was a lot about dismantling fears I had around sharing myself, because the work that I do naturally is give others the spotlight. And I felt like this was a path of the master. And the master is also a teacher. So it was owning the aspects within myself that want to teach and love to teach. Because where there's learning, which I'm constantly doing, there's, of course, room for that learning to be spoken through me as well, in a way that I have integrated, in the way that I have witnessed it. And that's why I feel like it was so important to have an experiential learning through this whole 23 days, because a lot of it can be from teachers, books, podcasts, and that learning sometimes just stays in the intellect because the body isn't naturally feeling it in many ways. Like there's some times where I'm researching for a podcast and I'll have like a overwhelm of emotions and I'll feel them, and I'll, it's happening more after Egypt when I hear something that like resonates. And because I had the experience of that truth that is coming through someone else, I can immediately match it to something within me. So I feel like the new version that is emerging is more of that stepping into utilizing the knowledge, the wisdom that I've collected so far, and hopefully from other lifetimes, and utilizing that to plant my own grain of sand into this whole awakening. We're all weaving together. That's why I love being able to do this because it brings that new consciousness of collaboration. Whereas maybe a past version of me grew up very competitive and grew up, as an athlete, as playing sports. You're grown up with this program of, if there's someone better than you, then all you have to do is work harder than them, and then you'll surpass them if you outwork. And now it's like we're working together and we're lifting each other up at the same time. So I feel like that is definitely an emergence of opening collaboration in a more massive way, in a more personal way, as well, and bringing people together with this strong sense of mission that alone they can only, as you said, this African proverb of, if you go alone, you can go fast, but if you go together, you can go far. And I feel like any of that energy of competition or lack is being slowly dissolved within me, and opening up space to be a point of attraction for many people to be able to lift each other up, and doing that in my own power, doing that from a sense of, I know who I am in truth. I know myself in truth. So, and I know how I serve in truth. So that is, I feel, what is emerging from you right now. You have played a huge role in that, and just infinite gratitude to be able to have these opportunities and have these moments of creating this sacred space and container to allow for more to come in, more wisdom, more love, more realizations, more insights, more collaboration to emerge as well.
I'm grateful for you as well.
Till next time.
Till next time.